The smell of iron and wet soil hit her before she understood where she was. Ilara's bare feet sank into ground that squelched wrong, too warm, too thick, and her walking stick struck something that was not a rock and not a root, something that yielded like flesh. She jerked the stick back, and her fingers found the sticky residue on the wood, and she knew. Blood. She was standing in blood-soaked earth. She had been following the river. That was all. The river that ran behind the Greymore Pack's eastern border, the one she followed every morning to reach the field hospital, where she worked as a wound dresser, cleaning and packing injuries for wolves who never thanked her, never looked at her, never acknowledged that the blind Omega kneeling at their bedsides was the reason they kept their infected legs. The river had split somewhere she could not see, and she had followed the wrong fork, and the sound of water had been replaced by something else entirely. A low, wet, grinding sound. Wolves in their shifted forms tearing into each other. The Battle of Ashenmoor, which she had heard the soldiers whispering about for weeks. It was not supposed to be here. Or perhaps she was not supposed to be here. The distinction did not matter when a body hit the ground 6 feet to her left, and she felt the spray of hot blood across her cheek. She dropped to her knees. Not out of choice. Her legs simply stopped working. The clay pressed cold and gritty through her thin linen dress, the dress she had patched 11 times because the Greymore quartermaster said blind Omegas didn't warrant new clothing. The world was a roar of sound around her growls and the crack of bone, the horrible wet snap of a jaw closing on a throat, and Ilara pressed her palms flat against the earth and tried to make herself small. She was good at that. 23 years of practice. She could not see the wolf that landed in front of her, but she felt it. The ground shook. The air changed like the pressure drop before a thunderstorm, and suddenly there was a wall of heat between her and the rest of the battlefield. The sounds of fighting seemed to bend around, that heat deflected, pushed back. She smelled cedar smoke and something darker underneath, like the way the air tasted before lightning struck a tree. Her wolf dormant and silent for 23 years, the wolf that every healer in Greymore had declared dead or non-existent stirred. Not woke, stirred. Like something turning over in deep water, the massive wolf in front of her took a hit meant for her chest. She heard it, the thud of impact, against a body that was not hers, a grunt that was half human, even in wolf form the scatter of gravel as enormous paws braced against the ground. He didn't move. He absorbed the blow, and he stayed exactly where he was between her and whatever had tried to kill her. Then the sounds of battle began to die. Not gradually. All at once. Like someone had pressed a hand over the mouth of the world. She heard bones cracking, reshaping, and the wolf became a man. She could tell because the center of gravity shifted, the breathing changed, and a hand enormous, rough with calluses, impossibly warm, closed around her upper arm. "Who are you?" His voice was low, shredded from hours of combat, but beneath the roughness was something she could not identify. It was not anger, though it should have been. It was not impatience. It sounded almost like a man who had been punched in the stomach and was trying to remember how to breathe. "I am sorry," she said. "I followed the wrong branch of the river. I could not see the markers. I cannot see anything. I am blind." His hand did not release her arm. His thumb moved once across the inside of her elbow, where her skin was thinnest, where the scar from a Greymore beta's claws had healed, white and raised. He traced that scar like he was reading it. "Who did this to you?" It was not a question. She understood that immediately. It was a cataloguing. He was making a list. She had spent enough years around wounded soldiers to know when a man was assessing damage, versus when a man was planning violence, and the Alpha King of the Blackmere Pack was planning violence. She knew who he was. Everyone knew. Even in Greymoor, the lowest pack in the Eastern Territories, even among the wound dressers and the servants who slept in the cold rooms above the field hospital, they whispered about Cale Blackmere, the king who had taken his father's throne at 16 by defeating him in single combat. The king whose wolf was a black so pure it swallowed light. The king who had fought 7 wars and never lost a single battle. The king who at 31 had no Luna, no mate, no interest in anything except expanding his territory and training his warriors. That king was kneeling in the mud of a battlefield, holding her arm with a gentleness that made no sense, and her dead wolf was moving inside her chest for the first time in her life. "I need to go back," she said. "My patients will need me. There will be wounded from this." "I dress wounds at the Greymoor Field Hospital." He was quiet for long enough that she thought perhaps he had been distracted by something on the battlefield. Then he spoke, and his voice had changed, gone lower and rougher, as if the words were being dragged out of a place he did not usually access. "You are Greymoor." "Yes. And they send you blind to dress wounds. I am good at it. I work by touch. I can feel infection before it shows on the surface. I can feel when a bone is set wrong, when a tendon has not been stitched correctly. My hands are better than sighted eyes for this." His thumb traced the scar again. There were other scars on her arms, she knew. The long one on her left forearm, where the Beta Harlan had shoved her into a broken window frame when she was 14. The series of small, round burns on the backs of her hands, where the Greymoor Pack mother, a woman named Celine, had pressed a heated spoon to punish Elara for reading the medicine texts with her fingers for learning things above her station. The thin white line at her wrist, where she had been tied too tightly to a bedpost at age 9 during her first and only attempt to run away. She heard his breathing change. She could not see his face, but she imagined it must be terrible because the air around him had gone very still, the way air goes still in the eye of a hurricane. "You will not go back to Greymoor," he said. "I have to. My patients, your patients are soldiers who fight for a pack that burns a child's hands for learning." He said this flatly without drama, and that was worse than if he had shouted. "You will come with me to Blackmere. I cannot. I do not know you." He made a sound that was almost a laugh but had no humor in it. "You do not know me. But your wolf does." I felt it. The moment I shifted, the moment I stepped between you and that attack, I felt your wolf reach for mine. It has been sleeping. It woke up for me. She wanted to deny it. She opened her mouth to deny it, and nothing came out because it was true, and she had never been a good liar. Her wolf, the wolf that every alpha and every healer in Greymoor had told her was dead, the wolf whose absence made her worthless, was pressing against the inside of her ribs like an animal trying to break through a door. It was reaching for him. She could feel it, and it was the most terrifying thing she had ever experienced, because Elara had spent her entire life building her identity around the absence of her wolf. If her wolf was not dead, then what else had she been wrong about? She pulled her arm free. He let her. That surprised her. "I need to think," she said. "You need to eat," he said. "I can hear your stomach. When did you last have a full meal?" She did not answer because she could not remember. Greymoor wound dressers ate last, after the soldiers and the betas and the pack mother's household, and by then there was usually a heel of bread and whatever thin broth had been left in the bottom of the pot. Sometimes there was nothing. She had learned to chew willow bark to quiet her stomach. He exhaled. The breath hit her face, and she smelled cedar smoke again, and underneath it the sharp metallic scent of his blood. He was wounded. She reached out without thinking, the way she always did, her hands finding the source of blood automatically, and her fingers landed on a gash across his ribs, 4 inches long and deep enough that she could feel the white edge of bone. "You are hurt," she said. "It does not matter. It does matter. This needs to be closed. You will lose too much blood, and the edges will necrose if they are not stitched within the hour. Sit still." She did not wait for his permission. She pulled the small kit from the pocket of her dress, the kit she always carried, needles and catgut thread, and a tin of honey and yarrow salve she made herself in the field hospital when no one was watching. She worked by touch, as she always did, her fingers reading the wound the way a sighted person would read text, feeling the depth, the direction of the tear, the places where the muscle beneath had been damaged. She cleaned the wound with water from the canteen on her belt. She stitched it with small, precise movements. She packed it with salve. He did not move. He did not flinch. But she felt something change in the quality of his stillness, a kind of focused attention that made her skin prickle. She had stitched hundreds of wolves. None of them had ever been this still. None of them had ever watched her. She could feel his gaze on her hands, like heat, with this much concentration. "You are wasted at Greymore," he said when she finished. She tied off the last stitch and sat back on her heels. The clay was drying on her knees. Her dress was ruined. She could smell her own exhaustion, a sour scent under the blood and the earth. "I am going to pick you up now," he said. "Not because you cannot walk, because you have been walking alone for too long, and I am done with it. That is not your decision to make. It is. You are my mate. I knew it the moment my wolf scented you across this field. I fought through 40 wolves to reach you, because my body would not let me do anything else. I have been waiting 15 years for you, and I am not waiting another minute. You can argue with me at Blackmere. You can argue with me for the rest of our lives. But right now, I am taking you off this battlefield." He picked her up. She should have fought it. She had spent 23 years fighting everything, fighting for food, fighting for space, fighting for the right to learn, wound dressing, fighting the daily small cruelties that Greymore inflicted on its weakest member. But his arms closed around her, and her wolf pressed against the inside of her chest, and made a sound she had never heard before, a sound like a lock turning. And she was so tired, she was so unbearably tired. She put her face against his neck, against the place where his pulse beat strong and steady, under skin that smelled like cedar smoke and old battle leather, and she let herself be carried. She fell asleep before they left the field. She did not mean to, but the warmth of him after 23 years of cold, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat after 23 years of silence, the feeling of being held after 23 years of nothing, it undid her. Her body simply surrendered. Her wolf curled inside her chest and went quiet in a way that was not dormancy, that was peace, and she dreamed of nothing. She woke in a bed. That was the first wrong thing. She had not slept in a bed since she was 6 years old, and her parents had died in the border raids, and Greymore had taken her in as a charity case, a blind orphaned Omega, and put her on a pallet in the cold room above the field hospital. The bed she was in now was enormous. The sheets smelled like lavender and something herbal, rosemary perhaps, and they were soft in a way that made her throat close, because she had forgotten that fabric could feel like this against skin. She had been sleeping on a wool blanket, so old, and felt that it was essentially a board. She sat up. The room was warm. Not just warm, heated in a way that suggested a fireplace, and perhaps heated stones in the walls. She could feel the even distribution of warmth. She could hear a fire cracking somewhere to her left. She could smell bread. Real bread, not the hard heel ends. Bread that had been baked recently, that was still giving off steam and the sweet, yeasty scent of wheat and butter. "Good morning," his voice came from her right. Close. He had been sitting beside the bed. She heard the creak of a chair and the soft sound of a book being set down, pages against wood. "How long?" she said. 14 hours. "You have been asleep for 14 hours. My physician checked you. He said you are malnourished, dehydrated, and your bones are showing through your skin. He also said your hands are the most capable he has ever seen, and asked if you would consider joining his medical staff. I told him I would ask you when you woke up, but that no one in my kingdom would ever put you on your knees to dress wounds again. I like dressing wounds. It is the only thing I am good at." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is a sentence that someone taught you. Who taught you that you were only good for one thing?" She did not answer. "Elara." He said her name like he had been practicing it. She had not told him her name. He must have asked someone. She wondered who. She wondered if he had gone to Greymore. The thought made something cold move through her stomach. "Your pack," he said, and the word pack came out like something rotten he was spitting from his mouth. "Your pack. I sent my commander to collect your belongings. Do you know what he found? One dress, one pair of shoes too small for you, the soles worn through, a tin of salve, 3 books written in a raised dot script that my commander did not recognize, but that I assume you made for yourself, and a pallet on the floor of a room with no heating, no window covering, and a door that locks from the outside. The door locked from the outside because Selene said she wandered in her sleep." That was not true. Elara did not wander. The door locked from the outside because Selene believed Omegas should be contained after dark, because Selene believed blind Omegas were a curse on the pack, because Selene had told her once casually, while pressing the heated spoon to the back of Elara's 12-year-old hand, that she should be grateful she was blind, because at least she did not have to see how disgusting she was. Selene had said this while braiding her own daughter's hair. Elara remembered the sound of the comb through the girl's hair, the gentle rhythm of it, the way Selene's voice had been soft and maternal when she spoke to her daughter, and then shifted without pause, without changing register, to deliver cruelty to Elara. That was the thing about Selene. She was not a monster. She was a perfectly ordinary woman who was kind to her own children, and brutal to the child who was not hers. And she did not see any contradiction in this, and that made her worse than a monster, because monsters at least knew what they were. Elara did not tell Kyle any of this. She said, "I need to feel the room." He stood. She heard him move away from the bed, giving her space. She swung her legs over the edge, and her feet touched warm stone. Not cold, packed earth. Warm stone. Her feet, which were cracked and calloused from years of bare walking on frozen ground, flexed against the warmth, and she felt her throat tighten again. She mapped the room with her hands and her walking stick. It was large, 4 paces by 6. The bed was against the northern wall. The fireplace was on the west wall, large with a stone mantel she could reach if she stretched. There was a table near the fireplace with 2 chairs. The bread was on the table. She found it, and her hand stopped moving because beside the bread there was a plate of sliced meat and a bowl of something that smelled like stewed apples and cinnamon, and a cup of tea that was still warm. "Eat," he said from across the room. "You do not need permission." She ate. She tried to eat slowly because she knew what happened when a starved body was given too much food. Too quickly, she had treated the cramping and the vomiting often enough in others, but the bread was so good that her hands shook. She ate the bread, and then the meat, and then the stewed apples, and she drank the tea, and it was the first time in years that her stomach didn't hurt afterward. It was the first time in years that the hollow feeling between her ribs, the one she had stopped noticing, because it was always, there was gone. He sat down across from her. She heard him pour himself tea. He drank. She heard him swallow. "I want to tell you something," he said, "and I want you to listen before you argue with me. I am not going to argue. You will." He sounded certain and also faintly amused, which irritated her. "You have been arguing with the world since you were 6 years old. I have known you for 16 hours, and I can already tell that you argue the way other people breathe. It is automatic, and it is constant." She felt her mouth twitch. She pressed her lips together. "I felt the bond the moment you stumbled onto that field," he said. "My wolf has never reacted like that. I have been in war since I was 16. I have smelled blood and fear and death 1,000 times. Yesterday my wolf ignored every enemy on that field and went to you, not because you were in danger, because you were mine. I know that is a difficult sentence to hear from a man you have known for 16 hours. I am not asking you to feel the same way. I am asking you to stay here in this room, in this kingdom, and let yourself be safe while you decide what you feel." She wrapped her hands around the teacup. It was ceramic smooth, glazed with something that had a faint texture under her fingertips. Someone had made this cup with care. The handle was the right size for a woman's hand. Had he chosen it? "What if I decide I feel nothing?" she said. "Then you stay anyway, as my physician's assistant, as a free citizen of Blackmere, as a woman who eats 3 meals a day and sleeps in a real bed and is never locked in a room again. The bond does not change what I owe you as a king. You wandered onto my battlefield, blind and alone, and my kingdom failed to protect you before I did. That debt exists, whether you are my mate or not." She had no frame of reference for this. In Greymore, omegas were currency. They were traded, assigned, contained. The idea that an alpha, the Alpha King, was offering her safety with no conditions attached was so foreign that her brain could not process it. She sat with the teacup in her hands, and she felt her wolf stir again, pressing against her ribs, and she did not know what to say. So she said, "Your stitches need to be checked. Come here." He laughed. It was a short sound, surprised out of him, and it changed the entire temperature of the room. He moved his chair closer. She reached out and found his side, found the bandage over the wound she had stitched on the battlefield, and she peeled it back carefully and let her fingers read the healing. It was healing fast. Faster than any wound she had ever treated. Under her fingertips, the edges of the gash were already knitting to the new skin, warm and tight. She had stitched this wound 12 hours ago. It should have been raw and swollen. Instead, it was closing as if days had passed. "This is healing too fast," she said. He did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice was careful. "It started healing the moment you touched it." She pulled her hand back. "On the battlefield," he said, "when you stitched it. My wolf felt your hands, and the wound began closing. My physician noticed. He has never seen anything like it. He asked me what you did differently, and I told him I did not know, because I was too busy trying not to pick you up and carry you away from that field to pay attention to medical technique." She pressed her fingertips together. Her hands were shaking again, but not from hunger this time. "I do not have a wolf," she said. "Every healer in Greymore confirmed it. I am wolfless. Whatever you felt, it was not. Your wolf woke up for me on that battlefield. I felt it. You felt it. Saying it didn't happen does not make it true." She stood up from the table. She needed space. She needed to think in a place where his cedar smoke scent was not filling her lungs, and making her wolf, her supposedly dead wolf, press against her ribs like it was trying to break out through her sternum. She found the window. She could not see through it, but she could feel the cool glass and the faint draught at the edges, and she could hear far below the sounds of a kingdom. Blackmere. She heard the ring of a blacksmith's hammer, the voices of people in a market, the laughter of children, a dog barking. She heard the organized sounds of a functioning community. Greymore had never sounded like this. Greymore had sounded like boots on frozen ground, and the low, constant growl of wolves who were always hungry, always angry, always looking for someone weaker to punish. She pressed her forehead against the glass, and she let herself feel the enormity of what was happening to her. 3 days passed. She did not leave the room on the first day. On the second day, Kyle brought a woman named Maren, who was the head of the Blackmere Medical Hall, a wiry, sharp-voiced beta with hands that smelled like antiseptic and calendula oil. And Maren spent 4 hours testing Ilara's knowledge of wound care and herbalism and anatomy. At the end of the 4 hours, Maren said, "You trained yourself blind, and you know more than half my staff." "How?" "The books in the raised dot script," Ilara said. "I made them from medical texts. I transcribed them by having other Omegas read aloud to me, while I pressed the raised dots into leather pages. It took 6 years. Maren was quiet. Then she said, "Who taught you the raised dot system?" "No one. I invented it when I was 10. I needed a way to read." Ilara heard Maren turn to Kyle. She heard the beta say, "Your Majesty, this woman is not a wound dresser. This woman is a physician, a better one than me, likely. If you do not mind, I would like her in my medical hall immediately." "She's not mine to give," Kyle said. "Ask her." Maren asked her. Ilara said yes before the beta had finished the sentence, and then felt embarrassed by her own eagerness. But Maren laughed and gripped her hand and said, "I will see you at dawn," and left. On the 3rd day, Ilara worked in the medical hall. The hall was warm and well lit, Maren told her, though the light did not matter to Ilara. What mattered was the organization. Supplies were labeled, instruments were clean. There was a system. In Greymore, the field hospital had been a tent with a dirt floor and a single table and whatever supplies Ilara could scavenge or make herself. Here there were rooms. There were assistants. There was a garden of medicinal herbs maintained by 2 dedicated herbalists. There was a locked cabinet of rare compounds that Maren gave Ilara the key to on the 1st day. She treated 12 patients. 3 were warriors with training injuries. 2 were children with fevers. 1 was an elderly Omega with joint pain so severe she had not slept in weeks. Ilara mixed a poultice from comfrey and willow bark and ginger root and applied it to the old woman's knees and hips, and the woman grabbed Ilara's hand and said, "Oh, child. What are you doing? It is warm. It has not been warm in years." Ilara did not understand what the woman meant until Maren, who had been watching from across the room, came to her afterward and said quietly, "Your hands were glowing." "That is not possible. I know what I saw. When you touched her joints, your hands produced light. Faint golden light. The pain relief was instantaneous. I have been treating Grandmother Yara for 3 years, and nothing has worked like that. Nothing has worked at all. Ilara pressed her palms flat against the table. They felt normal. They felt like her hands. She did not tell Kyle. She was not sure why. Perhaps because the list of things she did not understand about herself was growing too long, and adding another item felt dangerous, like stacking stones on a wall that was already leaning. Perhaps because telling him would mean admitting that she was more than a blind Omega wound dresser, and she had been a blind Omega wound dresser for so long that she did not know who she was without that identity. Perhaps because she was afraid that if she was something more, something powerful, then Greymoor's cruelty had not just been unkindness. It had been intentional. They had known. They had suppressed her deliberately. Kyle came to the medical hall each evening. He did not hover. He sat in a chair near the door, and he read reports, and he waited for her to finish. Then he walked her back to her room, her hand on his arm, and he described the corridors to her. Not in the utilitarian way that people usually described things to the blind turn left here, 3 steps down door on your right. He described them the way a person describes a painting. The torchlight makes the stone look like old honey. There is a tapestry on this wall of a wolf hunt, and the lead wolf has an expression that looks more annoyed than fierce, like someone interrupted his dinner. The window at the end of this hall faces west, and right now the sunset is making the river look like someone poured copper into it. No one had ever described the world to her this way. No one had ever assumed she wanted to know what things looked like. In Greymoor they had spoken to her in short sentences, commands, mostly as if blindness had also made her stupid. On the 5th evening he stopped in the corridor outside her room and said, "There is something I need to tell you." She waited. "Greymoor has sent a delegation. They are requesting your return." Her hand tightened on his arm. The cedar smoke smell of him sharpened, which she had learned meant his wolf was close to the surface, and his arm under her fingers went rigid with tension. "Their alpha, a man named Torren, claims you are Greymoor property. He says you signed a service contract at age 12. "I was 12, Ilara said. "I could not read the document. I did not know what I was signing." "I know." He said this very quietly. His hand came up and covered hers where it rested on his arm. "I told the delegation that Black Mere does not recognize contracts signed by children, that Black Mere does not recognize the concept of Omega property, and that if Torren sets foot in my kingdom again, I will remove his hands, so he cannot sign anything either." They left. But they will be back. Torren does not lose things he considers his, even things he treats like garbage. Why does he want me back? I was nothing to them. I dressed wounds, and I slept in a locked room, and I ate scraps. Why would they send a delegation? Kyle was quiet. She felt his thumb trace a circle on the back of her hand, the same absent gesture he had made on the battlefield, and she realized it was not absent at all. It was deliberate. It was the way he touched her when he was thinking about something he did not want to say. "Kyle, I think they know what you are," he said. "I think they have always known. I think the reason they kept you contained, kept you hungry, kept you in the dark is because they were afraid of what would happen if you ever got strong enough to find out." She pulled her hand free. Her heart was beating too fast. Her wolf was pressing against her ribs again, pressing hard, and her palms were tingling the way they had tingled when she touched Grandmother Yara's joints. "What am I?" she said. "I do not know yet, but my physician has a theory, and it frightens him, and my physician is not a man who frightens easily." She went to her room, and she sat on the edge of the bed, and she pressed her tingling palms against the cool sheets, and she breathed. In and out, the way she had taught herself to breathe in the locked room in Greymore, when the darkness which was her permanent state became too much, and she needed to remind herself that she was alive, that she existed, that the darkness was not everything. Her wolf moved inside her. Not a stir this time. A surge. She felt it rise up through her chest and into her throat, and her palms blazed with heat, and the room filled with light that she could not see, but could feel the warmth of it on her own face, and something cracked open inside her that had been sealed shut for 23 years. She heard the door open. She heard Kyle cross the room in 3 strides. She felt his hands close around her wrists gently, and his voice was saying her name, but it sounded very far away. Ilara, look at me. I cannot look at you. I am blind. Open your eyes. She opened her eyes, and she saw, not clearly, not fully, shapes, light and shadow, the outline of a man kneeling in front of her, enormous, dark-haired, his face a blur of hard angles, and something she thought might be his eyes burning amber even through her fractured vision. She saw the shape of her own hands between his hands, and they were glowing, golden light the color of early morning sun through river water pouring from her palms. She screamed, not from fear, from the sheer overwhelming sensation of sight after 23 years of nothing even partial sight, even these swimming blurred shapes. It was too much. Her wolf howled inside her, and the light pulsed brighter, and Kyle pulled her against his chest and held her there while she shook. I can see, she said into his neck. His pulse was hammering under her lips. I can see shapes. Kyle, I can see shapes. I know, he said. His voice was wrecked. She felt moisture on her hair and realized that the Alpha King, the wolf who had fought 7 wars and never lost, was crying into her hair. I know, sweetheart. I know. The physician's name was Aldrich, and he was a thin, precise man who smelled like old paper and dried mint. He had Ilara sit in a chair in the medical hall while he examined her eyes and her hands, and the faint luminescence that still clung to her skin like phosphorescence. I need to ask you about your parents, he said. I do not remember them. They died in the border raids when I was 6. My mother was an Omega. My father was... I do not know what my father was. I was told he was a low-ranking warrior. Nobody important. Aldrich was quiet for a long time. She heard him turning pages. She heard the scratch of a quill. I do not believe that is accurate, he said finally. The ability you are displaying, the healing light, the restoration of your own sight, these are not Omega traits. These are not even Alpha traits. There has not been a wolf with these abilities in 200 years. The last one was Serafina Ashvele, the Lunar Prime, founder of the original 5 packs. She heard Kyle shift behind her. His presence was a constant now. He had not left her side since the light had blazed from her palms, and she was starting to wonder if he ever would. You are saying she is a descendant of the Lunar Prime, Kyle said. I am saying, Aldrich said carefully, that the abilities match. Healing hands. Dormant wolf that awakens under extreme emotional stress, gradually restoring sight. The Lunar Prime line was thought to have been extinguished during the Purge, when the old packs destroyed each other. But it is possible that a child survived, that she was hidden in a minor pack, that she was deliberately kept weak, kept blind, kept dormant by people who knew what she was and feared what she would become. The room was very quiet. Torren knew, Ilara said. The Greymore Alpha. He knew. The locked door, Aldrich said. The malnutrition, the suppression of your wolf. These are not random cruelty, Miss Ilara. These are containment protocols. Someone was keeping you from coming into your power. She thought about Selene. She thought about the heated spoon on the back of her hands, always her hands, and she understood suddenly why it had always been her hands. Selene had been burning the part of her that healed. Selene had been trying to damage the gift before it could manifest. But Selene had braided her daughter's hair while she did it. Selene had hummed a lullaby while pressing heated metal to a child's skin. And that was the thing. Elara could not reconcile the thing that made Selene more disturbing than any straightforward villain. Selene had believed she was protecting her pack. Selene had believed the Lunar Prime bloodline was dangerous, a dormant catastrophe, and that what she was doing to Elara was not cruelty, but prevention. Elara had heard her once, late at night, standing outside the locked door speaking to someone. Possibly Torren. Possibly herself. Selene had said, in a voice that was heavy and flat with exhaustion, "The girl's hands are getting warmer. I burned them again today. I hate doing it. But if she wakes up, if she comes into it, none of us will survive. You know the stories. The Lunar Prime didn't just heal," she commanded. "Every wolf within 100 miles bent to her will. That cannot happen again. We are not strong enough to resist it." Elara had been 14 when she heard that. She had not understood it. She had filed it away in the part of her mind that stored things she could not explain, alongside the warmth in her hands and the stirring in her chest, and the way animals went still and calm when she touched them. Now she understood it, and the understanding was not liberating. It was heavy. It sat in her chest like a stone. She did not tell Kyle about the overheard conversation. Not yet. She needed to sit with it first. She needed to decide what it meant that the woman who had burned her hands had done it out of fear rather than hatred, and whether fear made cruelty forgivable. And she already knew the answer was no, but the answer being no did not make the question simple. 2 weeks passed. Elara's vision improved daily. The blurred shapes sharpened into edges, into colors, into faces. The first face she saw, clearly, was Maren's, angular and freckled and perpetually skeptical. And Maren had said, "Well, at least now you can see that I am the most beautiful woman in Blackmere." And Elara had laughed so hard she had to sit down. The second face she saw clearly was Kale's. She was in the medical hall reorganizing the herb stores when he came through the door. He was back from a council meeting, and he was wearing black because he always wore black, and his hair was damp from the rain. And he looked at her the way he always looked at her, with the focused intensity of a man who had been waiting his entire adult life for one specific person, and was still stunned that she existed, and she saw him for the first time. He was not handsome in the way she had imagined. Handsome was too soft a word. His face was all hard planes, a jaw like the edge of an axe, a nose that had been broken at least twice, a scar that ran from his left temple into his hairline. His eyes were amber true, amber the color of tree resin with light behind it. He was enormous. She had known this from touching him, but seeing it was different. He filled the doorway. His shoulders were so broad that he had to angle slightly to come through. He saw her looking at him. He stopped. "You can see me," he said. Yes. He did not move. She watched something happen in his face, something he was trying to control, a crack in the granite of him, and then he said very quietly, "What do you see?" She wanted to give him something true. Not pretty. True. "A man who describes sunsets to a blind woman," she said, even though she cannot see them, even though he does not have to. A man who does it anyway, because he thinks she deserves to know what the world looks like. His amber eyes burned. He crossed the room and his hands found her face, and he held her like something precious, like something he was afraid would break, and she put her hands on his wrists and felt his pulse, and it was racing. The Alpha King's pulse was racing under her fingertips, and she thought, I am never going back to the cold room. I am never going back to the locked door. I am never going back to a world where no one thinks I deserve to know what the sunset looks like. She kissed him first. It surprised them both. Her mouth found his, and he made a sound against her lips that was not quite human, a low vibration that she felt in her chest, and her wolf answered it. Her wolf surged up and met his wolf somewhere in the space between them, and the kiss deepened, and his hand slid from her face into her hair, and her back hit the herb shelf, and 3 jars of chamomile crashed to the floor, and neither of them cared. He pulled back. His breathing was ragged. His forehead pressed against hers, and she could see his eyes. This close, could see the ring of gold around his pupils, could see herself reflected in them. If you do not want the bond, he said, and his voice was the most controlled she had ever heard it, the kind of control that was barely holding. I will stop. I will walk out of this room, and I will be your king and your protector and nothing else, but I need you to tell me now, because in about 30 seconds, my wolf is going to make that decision for me, and I would rather you made it instead. I made it, she said. I made it on the battlefield when you stood between me and a war. I made it when you carried me off a field full of blood and did not ask for anything in return. I made it when you described the color of the river at sunset to a woman who could not see. I do not need 30 seconds. He kissed her again, and this time there was nothing controlled about it. The delegation from Greymoor arrived 2 days later. Not a polite diplomatic party this time. Torrin himself. Alpha of Greymoor, a man whose voice Elara recognized immediately, a voice like gravel, dragged over metal, a voice that had told her at 6 years old that she should be grateful Greymoor was taking in a useless, blind pup. He brought 30 warriors. They stood in the Blackmere throne room, which Elara could now see, and the throne room was vast, the ceiling lost in shadow, the walls lined with banners of the Blackmere wolf silver on black. Kyle sat on the throne. He had asked Elara to stand beside him. She had refused. She stood at the base of the dais steps, deliberately placing herself between the throne and the Greymoor delegation. She felt Kyle's gaze on her back, felt his wolf's displeasure at her positioning, but he did not override her. He had promised her she could argue with him for the rest of their lives, and he was keeping that promise. Torrin looked at her. She could see him now for the first time, the man who had kept her in a locked room for 17 years. He was smaller than she had imagined, shorter than Kyle by half a head, thinner, with a face that might have been handsome once, but had gone pinched and anxious. His eyes moved over her, and she watched something happen in them, a flicker that was not anger. It was fear. Genuine, bone-deep fear. You look different, he said. I can see now. That tends to change a person. Torrin's jaw tightened. She could see the Greymoor warriors behind him, shifting, uncomfortable. They knew. They all knew what she was. They could feel it, perhaps. The power that had been building in her for 2 weeks, the golden warmth in her hands, the wolf inside her that was no longer dormant, but awake and growing stronger every day. Wolves could sense power. These wolves were sensing hers, and they did not like it. She belongs to Greymoor, Torrin said, addressing Kale. She is ours by contract and by pack law. She belongs to no one, Kyle said from the throne. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a man who could shift into the largest black wolf in the Eastern Territories and tear through 30 warriors without effort. And you do not want to test my patience on this point, Torren. Torren licked his lips. She could see the calculation behind his eyes, the desperate math of a man who had spent 17 years containing a weapon and was now watching that weapon stand calmly in the throne room of his most powerful rival. You do not know what she is, Torren said. If you knew, you would not be standing there looking at me like that. The Lunar Prime line is not a gift. It is a catastrophe. She does not just heal. When she reaches full power, she will command. Every wolf within her range will submit to her will. Every wolf, including yours, Blackmere, including you. Your kingdom will not be yours anymore. It will be hers. The throne room went absolutely silent. Elara felt every eye on her. She felt Kyle's gaze on her back, and she felt the Greymoor warrior's terror, and she felt Maren standing somewhere to her left, go very still. She felt the truth of what Torren was saying settle into the room like a cold wind. She turned to face Kyle. He was looking at her from the throne, amber eyes steady, and she searched his face for the thing she expected to find there. The fear, the calculation, the realization that his mate was not just a gift, but a threat, that loving her might cost him his kingdom. She did not find it. She found something else, something she had never seen directed at her in her entire life. Not from Greymoor, not from Selene, not from anyone. She found trust, I knew Kyle said. Aldrich told me 2 weeks ago. I have known since the night your hands blazed with light and your wolf woke up. I have known exactly what the Lunar Prime bloodline means, and exactly what it could do to my authority. He paused. His amber eyes did not waver. Do you know what I did with that information? I had Aldrich order more books on the Lunar Prime's history, so you would have resources when you were ready. I had Maren clear a training space in the medical hall so you could practice your abilities safely. I had the throne room warded against forced submission so that when you come into your full power, your command does not accidentally override anyone's free will. I have been preparing for you. Not against you, for you. Torren made a sound, a short, strangled sound, and Elara looked at him and she saw it. The moment, the one unexpected moment that undercut everything she thought she knew about him. He looked broken, not angry, not calculating. Broken. His shoulders sagged, and his thin face crumbled, and he said very quietly, so quietly, that only Elara and Kale and the nearest warriors could hear. I was 15 when they told me what she was. I was 15, and my father put a 6-year-old child in my arms and said, "Keep her weak, or she will destroy us all." What was I supposed to do? I was 15. It was not forgiveness. She would not forgive him. The locked door, the hunger, the cold, the scars, the years, none of that would be forgiven, and none of it should be. But for one moment, standing in the throne room of a kingdom that was not his, surrounded by wolves who would kill him if their king gave the word, Torren looked like what he was. A man who had been given a terrible choice, too young, and had chosen cruelty because it was the only tool he understood. It did not excuse him. It explained him. And explanations were a different thing entirely from absolutions. Leave, Kyle said. You will return to Greymoor. You will not contact Elara again. You will not approach my borders. If I learn that you have mistreated another Omega in your pack the way you mistreated her, I will not send a delegation. I will come myself. Torren left. His 30 warriors left with him. The throne room doors closed behind them with a sound like a coffin lid. Elara stood at the base of the dais and she breathed. The golden warmth in her hands pulsed gently in rhythm with her heartbeat, and she felt her wolf settle inside her chest, not dormant, not surging, just present. Awake. Alive. Kyle came down from the throne. She heard him descend the steps, and then he was behind her, his chest against her back, his arms closing around her. And he said into her hair, "You are going to be terrifying." She laughed. It came out shaky and wet because she was crying, and she had not realized it. "I do not want to command anyone," she said. "I know. That is why you will be good at it. The wolves who want power are the ones who shouldn't have it. The wolves who fear it are the ones who will use it wisely." He pressed his lips to her temple. "And I will be beside you. Not behind you, not in front of you, beside you. Every day, for the rest of our lives." This is not a negotiation. The marking ceremony happened at the next full moon. Elara had asked for it to be small. Kyle had agreed, and then the entire kingdom had shown up anyway, because apparently, when the Alpha King marks his mate, the concept of small does not exist. The courtyard was filled with wolves, hundreds of them. Torchlight turned the stone walls to warm amber, and the night air smelled like pine resin and wood smoke and the first frost of autumn. She could see all of it now. Her vision had continued to improve until it was sharper than any wolf's in the kingdom, which Aldrich said was consistent with the Lunar Prime bloodline overcompensation of a sense that had been suppressed too long. She could see the faces of the Blackmere wolves looking at her with curiosity and respect. And something else, something that took her a moment to identify, because she had never seen it directed at her before. Hope. They looked at her with hope. Maren stood to her right, arms crossed, wearing an expression that was trying very hard to be professionally neutral and failing spectacularly, because Maren's eyes were red, and she had been crying for 20 minutes and would deny it for the rest of her life. Kyle stood before her. He was wearing black because he always wore black, and the torchlight caught the scar on his temple and the hard planes of his face and his amber eyes, and she looked at him, and she thought, "I can see you. I can finally see you. Not just your face. You. The man who described sunsets. The man who ordered books. The man who warded a throne room to protect his people from a power he could have tried to control. I claim you," he said. His voice carried across the courtyard, clear and steady. "Not because you need me. Not because I found you. Because you walked blind onto a battlefield, and your wolf reached for mine, and every war I have ever fought became meaningless compared to the act of keeping you alive. I claim you because you stitched my wounds when you did not know my name. I claim you because you argue with me constantly, and I have never been happier. I claim you, Elara of no pack, Elara of every pack, Elara, who heals with her hands and sees more blind than most wolves see with perfect sight. I claim you, and I will never unclaim you, and that is the only promise I have ever made that I know I will keep." She felt her wolf rise. Not a surge this time, a bloom. A slow opening like a night flower, and the golden light poured from her hands and spread across the courtyard, and every wolf in Blackmere felt it, the warmth, the healing, the ancient power of the Lunar Prime line awakening fully for the first time in 200 years, and not a single wolf submitted against their will, because Kyle had warded the throne room and the courtyard, and every gathering space in Blackmere, and the warmth washed over them without compulsion, without force, without command. It was just warmth. just healing. Just a woman, finally allowed to be what she was. He bit her, the marking bite, the ancient bond teeth against the junction of her neck and shoulder, and it hurt a sharp, bright pain that bloomed into something else. Something that was not pain at all. Something that was connection, permanent and unbreakable. A cord of fire and cedar smoke and amber light that tied her wolf to his wolf and would tie them until the day they died. She bit him back. This was not traditional. The Luna did not usually bite the Alpha, but she was Elara and she argued with him constantly, and she was not going to let him claim her without claiming him in return. Her teeth sank into the muscle of his shoulder, and she felt him shudder, and his arms crushed her against him, and somewhere in the courtyard she heard Maren say loudly, and without professional neutrality, "About damn time." The crowd laughed. The torches flickered. The first frost of autumn settled on the courtyard stones, like sugar on dark bread. Much later in the room that was now their room, the room with the warm stone floors and the lavender sheets, and the fireplace that crackled, and the window that faced west, Elara stood at the glass and looked out at the Blackmere kingdom in moonlight. She could see the river. It did not look like copper tonight. It looked like silver, like someone had poured mercury into the valley, and the trees along its banks were bare and black and beautiful. Kyle came up behind her. His arms circled her waist. His chin rested on the top of her head. His marking bite throbbed gently on her neck, a warm pulse that matched her heartbeat. "What do you see?" he said. She leaned back against him. His chest was warm. His wolf rumbled contentedly against hers, two animals finally at rest after a very long chase. She said everything. It was not a metaphor. She was looking at the world with eyes that had been dark for 23 years, and it was midnight, and she could see every branch on every tree and every ripple on the river, and the single light burning in Maren's medical hall, where the beta was probably still reorganizing the herb stores and pretending she had not cried at the ceremony. She could see everything, and she was never going back to the dark. Kyle's hand spread warm across her stomach. His thumb traced a slow circle against the fabric of her nightdress. "You know," she said. "I know," he said. 3 weeks, Aldrich confirmed it this morning. She turned in his arms. His face was very close, amber eyes luminous in the moonlight, and she could see the wonder in them, the raw, unguarded wonder of a man who had spent 15 years believing he would die without a mate, without an heir, without anyone who could reach past the iron walls he had built around himself. She put her hand on his jaw. Her palm was warm. Not glowing, not now, but warm with the steady, gentle heat that was her birthright, the healing warmth of the lunar prime line. She said, "If it is a girl, she is going to argue with you." He said she already does. She laughed, and he kissed her, and the fire cracked in the hearth, and the moonlight poured through the window, and somewhere far below in the medical hall, Maren dropped a jar of chamomile, swore loudly, and began sweeping up the pieces. The river ran silver through the valley. The first frost of winter settled on the Blackmere kingdom. Elara kept her hand on the glass, and she felt the cold outside and the warmth inside, and her wolf curled around the new life growing beneath her heart, and the world was very quiet, and the world was very bright, and for the first time in her life, she did not need anyone to describe it to her. She could see it all.